Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV, and we're taking a look today at the ATEM Mini Extreme. This is the latest in a now growing line of video production switchers from Blackmagic that are incredibly reasonably priced for the functionality that they deliver. And this latest one has 8 HDMI inputs, a whole bunch of video effects and compositing features, and a lot of cool stuff that we're going to take a look at in this review. Now, if you are not familiar with the product line, my suggestion would be to check out my reviews first of the ATEM Mini and the ATEM Mini Pro, because each of these reviews kind of builds on the last one, just like these products tend to build on the prior edition. And all three of these products, the Mini Pro, and the Extreme, are all still available at different price points, and they all sort of work the same. And what we're going to do in this video is cover the things that this product has that the other two versions don't. So you'll definitely want to check those out just to get a feel for how the core functionality of this works. And here we're going to focus on what's new and different with this one versus the others in the line. And as you can see, it is a lot bigger than the prior iterations were. Now, I do want to let you know, in the interest of full disclosure, that I paid for this with my own funds. All the opinions you're about to hear are my own. No one is paying for this review, nor has anyone reviewed or approved what you're about to see before it was uploaded. So let's get into it now and see what this video switcher is all about. Now, the price point on the ATEM Mini Extreme here is $995. This is the most expensive ATEM Mini they make at the moment, but it's also the most feature complete. There is one version above this one called the Mini Extreme ISO that costs a little bit more. And what that one adds is the ability to record all of its inputs simultaneously in addition to recording its program output. If you don't need to record all of your inputs separately, then this Extreme, the one that I have here, is probably the one to go with. Now, I did want to take a minute and kind of go through the three different products so you can get an idea as to what separates them all. The original ATEM Mini is in the same form factor as the one I have in my hand right here. It allows for 4 inputs. It has some pretty good effects insofar as you can do Chroma key, which is green screening. You can put some titles up on screen. Really easy to get up and running, very portable, of course. And it was something that I felt was a really good value for its price tag. They then came out with the ATEM Mini Pro, which had everything the original Mini had, except it added the ability to record video and stream video out to major service providers all within the unit. So the original ATEM Mini functions pretty much the same as the Pro, except the fact that the Pro has the encoder built in to do the streaming and the recording without the need for a computer. So theoretically, you could get this thing configured, go out to your streaming location, and do everything without a computer at all, which can be very flexible. And the original ATEM Mini would just need a computer to do those things. But otherwise, there were pretty much the same features and performance out of both the Pro and the Mini. This one also added the ability to get a multi-viewer into the mix so you could see all the different inputs that were going in at the same time. The Extreme now kind of takes things to the next level because you get 4 more HDMI inputs. And if you look around on the back here, you can see that you've got 1 through 8 here. So you can have 8 cameras, 4 cameras, and 4 computers. Whatever you've got that outputs HDMI, you can plug into one of these inputs and switch between things. They've also added some features that you'll find in their more advanced broadcast hardware, including the ability to get 4 simultaneous green screens configured at once. They have a virtual input called Super Source that allows you to bring in multiple video sources together and mash them up into a single virtual input. We'll demo that in a little bit. There's just more that you can do with this insofar as mixing different video feeds together that are coming into it. If you don't need all that fancy stuff, then the Mini or the Mini Pro is going to be fine, but this does add significantly more opportunity to make a higher end production, but it also, as you'll see in a few minutes, adds more complexity to the mix as well. Now, like the other ATEM Mini devices, this is a 1080p device only. It will accept 720p devices, and it does support 60 frames per second, and it will do some conversion to get whatever you're plugging in up to the output format, but it will not do 4K. But they have addressed a lot of the complaints that people had from the prior versions of the ATEM Mini product line. The big one here is that it has 2 HDMI outputs. So what you can do here is have your program go out on HDMI 1, and then you can get the multi-viewer, which shows you everything that's plugged into the device on a single screen, out on HDMI 2. And as I mentioned, the Mini Pro here added that multi-viewer feature, but if you look on the back here, it only has a single HDMI output. So it could do the program feed or the multi-viewer, but not both. This one can do both and a few other things too through its HDMI outputs, and that makes this perhaps a little bit more flexible for some folks than the prior edition. Another great feature, which is a simple no-brainer kind of feature, is that they added a headphone jack so you could monitor the audio through headphones. And for whatever reason, the Mini and the Mini Pro did not have a headphone output. You had to get some kind of HDMI to audio adapter to get all that working. So it was nice to see them add the additional headphone port to this one. The other thing that they've added is a second USB port on the back. And one of the strongest features of these ATEM Mini products is that you can plug them into a laptop or a computer with the USB cable, and whatever the output of this thing is becomes a webcam on the computer. And this is a feature that is on all three of the ATEM Mini products. And it's great because you don't need a driver. You can plug it right into Zoom, and you've got this device that can process video for you, and you could stream the video out with a low-powered PC. I set one of these things up at a local house of worship, and we've been using it with Zoom, and it works great because we have a really low-end, cheap laptop and the ATEM Mini doing all the video processing, and it's worked out really, really well for them. Now, this one, as you'll notice, has two USB ports, and I found that you could actually plug this into two different computers and have the webcam output work on both at the same time. That was pretty neat. But in addition to that, you can use the webcam output on one USB port and have a hard drive plugged into the other one for recording. This one, like the ATEM Mini Pro, has the encoder built in to do that. So be sure to check out our review of the ATEM Mini Pro to get an overview as to how that encoder works. It works identically here on the Extreme. One thing they've added to the mix on both the Pro and the Extreme since we shot that Mini Pro video is that you can hook up a cell phone now to one of the USB ports here and have the device stream through that cell phone via a tethered connection. Your other option is to plug it into Ethernet and broadcast out over the local network. There is no Wi-Fi built in. You will notice here that there is a fan output. There's a fan on this one. In fact, there's a fan on all of the ATEM Minis, but like the other ones, you don't hear it. You'll feel some airflow going through it, but I never hear the fan kick on at any volume that would interrupt your production. So if this is sitting right next to your talent, or you are the talent operating the switcher while you're doing your thing, you should not hear the fan pick up on the mic. And I tested it with all ports occupied. I had all the digital effects going, and it was still pretty quiet. It will get a little warm to the touch, but no worse for wear there. So nice quiet use case here for the Mini Extreme, just like the other ones that we've reviewed. Now, one thing you'll note here is that there's a lot more buttons on the top of this. And what we'll do is step through what these buttons do as we get into all of the digital effects that this one adds to the mix. So without further ado, why don't we get this thing plugged in, and we'll get some things plugged into it, and we'll see how all of these new features work on the Extreme. All right, so we are all booted up right now, and we've got 6 out of the 8 inputs occupied, just to keep things relatively simple here. I have the multi-viewer coming out of this HDMI output here, as you can see, and then this is the program output, which I'll show you in a minute. I do have my computer connected to it for control over USB, but you could also just put this on the network with the Ethernet jack and control it over the network. The choice is yours. In addition to control, that computer can also grab the output of this as a webcam. So you've got, again, some options for how to control and how to make use of the video coming out of it. And on the surface here, it's actually pretty easy to navigate. So right now, just like the other ATEM Minis, if I hit 3 right now, that's going to give me my third camera. And you can see it's doing a nice cross dissolve between all of these different sources. And the reason it's doing that is I have the auto button here enabled. If I go to cut, it'll just do a hard cut between these things as I'm switching around. But you get the idea as to how that works. Now, if you want more specifics as to how you can use the control surface on the device itself, definitely check out the ATEM mini review, the original one that I did. We went into depth on that. There are some new buttons, though, added to the mix here. So like the other one, above each of these input buttons are audio controls. And what's cool about the ATEMs is that you have audio coming in on all of these HDMI ports in addition to the video. And on top of that, like the other ones, you have two analog inputs too, and you can control levels using these up and down arrow keys above each one. We covered that prior. Now this one, because it's got more surface area, also has the ability to do camera control. But you have to have Blackmagic cameras for that to work. But you can do some camera control here on each of these inputs in addition to the audio control that you could do before. Now, to unlock more of the advanced features of this, you do need to get their software control installed and operating. It runs on the Mac or on Windows. This is it right here. And I'm going to pull up the overlay here of the control surface because as I switch cameras on my computer, you can see that it updates the control surface here, so everything is always in sync as you're clicking around here, as you can see. And you also have the ability to control audio levels here too. So you can see we've got all 10 audio inputs on screen. And if I wanted to turn on camera 1's audio, I can hit that. And you just saw that red light there activate. And I could easily just turn it off by pushing a button on the control surface. We covered this in detail in the original mini review as well, but you get a really nice real-time, robust audio control board here that you can use to adjust things. And on the analog inputs, as we talked about in the prior video, you also have the ability to set delay, because oftentimes digital video coming over HDMI is a little slower than the analog audio coming in, so you can actually delay the audio to get things better in sync, and that's supported here, but only on the two inputs for the analog audio on the device. And then if you're using the Blackmagic cameras, you can control all 8 of them from the camera tab here. And again, what's cool about how you can control the ATEM is that you could have different operators on different tabs all communicating with the switcher simultaneously. It allows multiple users in to make these adjustments. So you can have one person on camera, you can have another person on audio, another one loading up titles here in the media thing, and then you can be operating the switcher. All really cool stuff. Now, as you saw at the beginning, this device has 2 HDMI outputs, and you can configure what those outputs do up here in the output menu. So right now, my HDMI output 1 is set to program, and output 2 is set to multi-view, but you have the option to output any of these other things instead if you want. And then on the device itself, just like the Mini Pro, there are buttons here on the right-hand side to determine what goes out of that first HDMI input. So again, it's on program right now, but I could have it output clean feeds of any of the 8 cameras, a clean program feed, the preview, or the multi-view, and you can set all that just by pushing one of these buttons on the right-hand side. Now, in addition to having 8 inputs, this device can allow you to mix more things together at the same time. So before, you had only 1 upstream keyer and 1 downstream keyer on the ATEM Mini and Mini Pro. This one gives you 4 upstream keyers and 2 downstream keyers. You also have the ability to do 2 DVE effects on screen at once versus only 1 before. And that, I think, is the bigger deal because DVE allows you to scale and move video around on screen. And let me give you a really simple example of that. All right, so right now I have camera 3 activated here, which is just a shot out my window. And like the other ATEMs, this has a picture-in-picture effect, so I could pull up this window here and move it around. No big deal. That was something we could do before. So check out the video on the original ATEM Mini for more information about this feature. But this one can do 2 things at once. So if I push this little button here, it will give me 2 things right next to each other. And one of the nice things about this new device, because it has more room on it, is that we have buttons to control what's in these boxes without having to go back to the computer. So you can see right now this DVE button is red, and number 5 here is red because this is the current active video stream that's on the right-hand box. But if I hit 3 here, as you can see, it switches. So you can switch what's inside the box without switching the background image. That might be helpful if you've got to change up some things in this 2-up box here. And likewise, I could push the DVE 1 button here and switch that around as well. So you have some pretty neat controls here just on the surface. And like the Mini and the Mini Pro, what's nice about having the control surface integrated here is that once you get it configured, you can deploy it out in the field and train some volunteers to operate it, because each button typically just does one thing. And once they know what buttons to push, it's pretty easy to have some relatively low-skilled video operators conduct a stream for a house of worship, for example. Like we did in the Mini Pro video, you can see how you can start streaming here just by pushing a button to get the stream activated. You can also start recording just by pushing the record button there. And pretty much everything you need to do for your live event can be done right from the control surface without the computer. But when you start getting into some more advanced features, like making use of all 6 of those keyers, you're probably going to want to have the computer ready, and it's going to add some complexity to the mix. Let's take a look at Chroma Key. Okay, so as I mentioned, we've got 4 keys here to play with, and key 1 and 2 right now are mapped for that 2-up DVE effect I showed you earlier. So if I enable these 2 and put them on air, as you can see, we get those 2 boxes up next to each other. And I want to leave that in place because my volunteers just want to have a button to push, and that is the easiest way to get that 2-up thing going. So what we're going to do is tie the Chroma key into key 3 here, and then we're going to do a second Chroma key with a different camera on key 4. And what's nice about the Extreme here is that you can have all these in together as opposed to having to constantly switch them out, because remember, we've got 4 key positions here versus only 1 on the other 2 ATEM Mini models. So let's get the 3rd key set up here for Chroma Key. So let me just pull that up so you can see we've got key 1 through 4 here. I'm going to click on key 3. And what I'm going to do is just give you my 2-up view here of the multi-viewer. And I'm just going to slide this over. And I'm going to click on Chroma Sample here. And now I've configured the fill source to be camera 1. Okay? And now what I'm going to do is just drag this box around. And if you look on the preview window, which is the big box on the left, you can see that little box moving around. And what that's doing is taking a color sample of the green screen behind the bear. And I'm just going to drop that there. And now that that's done, what I'll do is click on Preview, and that'll give us a sample as to how clean that key looks. And it looks pretty good. Again, we're just doing the basics here. I haven't lit the scene properly or configured anything more granularly in the settings, but this will give you an idea as to how it works. So let's get this set up. We've got my wide-angle lens here. I want to have the bear show up on the next take, so I'm going to enable it down here. And then when I take that live, you will see the bear now in the background there behind me, right? And then if I switch away from the bear back to the other shot that we had, the bear will disappear. The problem is that if I wanted to pull up a different camera shot, I got to make sure I push this and then cut that live so the bear doesn't keep popping up. And if I just leave him on air here, he will always stay on air whenever I switch to different things. And that's where the complexity comes in, because if you've been using OBS or vMix, you know that you can set up these virtual inputs and just have all the stuff work together when you switch to that scene in OBS or that input in vMix. On here, this works a lot more like a traditional video switcher does, and you have to get everything kind of configured on the preview side before you take it live. But one of the things they were able to add to the Extreme, because it is a larger device, are a set of macro buttons here. There are 6 of them, and those will line up with the macros that you can configure inside of their software. There's a pull-down menu here at the top for macros, and then you get this. And right now I've got this macro called Bear mapped to button number 1, and ATEM is mapped to button number 2 here. And let me show you what happens when we push those buttons. I'm just going to get one set up right now. This is the Chroma Key Bear example I used earlier. And then if I hit 2, you can see that it changes the background and the foreground keyed image out automatically. So basically what it's doing here is it's switching to the background camera and then activating the other key. Let me pull up the software control panel here so you can get a look at what's going on when I push the button. So we'll pull up our ATEM here, we'll get the macro thing out of the way, and then as I'm pushing this button here, you can see how it's switching between those things instantly because we were able to do that through a macro. And I have a video detailing how to get all of this programmed in with the macro functionality. You have to get it right each time. You have to record the sequence of buttons that you want to execute, but this seems to be a way that you could get some functionality that you might be used to on OBS or vMix working through the hardware. And just like everything else we've been talking about, once you get it configured in software, it'll be deployable in the hardware, and your volunteers can just work between these 6 buttons here to switch between different things. And this might be really useful if you've got a 4-way virtual set thing set up. You can easily switch between those sets with a single button push versus having to push a lot of buttons and queue things up. And I found that to be a simpler way to execute things. So it was cool to see those macro buttons integrated there. But it really shows you that there's a lot of potential to make this easier. And I think one of the things that was interesting about this product was that the packaging is much more retail oriented than some of their other packaging, which looks more professional. And I'm thinking they might want to try to maybe make a version of their software that behaves more like OBS or vMix. So this makes sense to people that are coming to this hardware from a software solution, because right now I think it's a little too complex for people who are very happy with OBS or vMix as their switching solution. But they do have something built in called SuperSource, which is kind of like a virtual input. And right now I've got it set up with a 4-way box here. Let's zoom out real quick and we'll take that live. So we'll hit the SuperSource button. And as you can see, we've got 4 different video boxes up on screen here at the same time, along with something running in the background. And in addition to that, I can enable all of my other keys here and get things layered on top. So you can do all 4 of your upstream keys. You can also do the downstream keys that we looked at in the other video on the ATEM Mini for doing bugs and lower thirds and that sort of thing. And you can have it all integrated on screen at the same time, or you can just leave this thing as is and have it work as its own virtual input. And what's useful about this is that I don't have to configure everything every time I want to take it live. I can just switch between cameras here, including the SuperSource as its own camera. And you do have the ability to move this stuff around and change the size of the boxes. So for example, here I could maybe move this one up or down or left or right here. You have the ability to make some adjustment there. You can adjust the size of the box. You can make one box bigger than another. And then they have some templates here to get you started. And of course, the background you can have be any input on the device, including images that you've loaded in or other inputs that you have coming in over the HDMI. Now, as we talked about in the original ATEM Mini review, the memory on these devices is very limited. So if you have a video that you want to roll in for something or have running in the background, it's going to have to come in over HDMI from something that can play that video. This thing can really only store about 20 still frames in its memory. It's not going to be able to do any kind of fancy video imagery there, so just be prepared for that. But the good thing is that you've got 8 inputs here, so you should have plenty of extra ports to bring in a few different videos that you want to play from another device. So overall, I think this is a very value-packed device from Blackmagic. You would be very hard-pressed to build yourself an 8-input 1080p HDMI computer that can do everything this thing can do for the same price or less. It's, I think, priced correctly. The problem, though, is the complexity when you really start working into some of the more advanced features. I think on the 4-input devices, they were a little bit easier to work with. This one, if you wanted to start replicating the kinds of things you would do in OBS or vMix, gets incredibly complex, especially if you're used to how some of those software solutions operate. And if you're buying this thinking, hey, cool, I can get a hardware OBS that I can take anywhere with me, yeah, sorta, but not quite, because you really gotta struggle with the software to get it to work in the same way. And I'm thinking here that Blackmagic should really look at updating their software and maybe making a version of it specifically for people that have come from the software switching world, namely the vMix and OBS users, because what you do in OBS and vMix is very different than how Blackmagic switchers operate. And in fairness to Blackmagic, their switchers operate the way professional switchers have worked for the last 30 years or so. But I think a lot of folks are learning a whole new paradigm of video production, especially live production. And this has a big learning curve to really get your arms around all of those features. And that's something that I know they can fix, because we were able to, just through a couple of quick macros, get this thing working sort of like that. And if they were to do that, or maybe some enterprising software developer has a crack at it, I think this could be a really killer hardware device, because it is capable of doing those things. It's just really complicated to get them to work the same way they do in a much easier fashion on software-based solutions. And I come back to this box, and this is what got me thinking about it, was that this box, again, looks a lot different than what they were putting their products in earlier. And I know who they're targeting, and unfortunately, if you're one of the people they're targeting with this thing, you're going to have to spend a lot of time getting this thing to work the way your OBS does now. So just be prepared for that. And if you're watching Blackmagic, I think you got some opportunities here to make the software a lot more intuitive. But that is not a deal breaker here. I think once you get the feel for this thing, it is great to have this much power packed into a price that this is being sold at. And I know a lot of folks in the production world, in the live event world, are going to get a lot of use and utility out of this. And you can get 4 or 5 of these for what just one of these things would have cost a couple of years back. So all in, good stuff from Blackmagic, and some definite room for improvement on the software. That's going to do it for now. Until next time, this is Lon.TV. Thanks for watching.
This channel is brought to you by the Lon.TV supporters, including gold level supporters Chris Allegretta, Tom Albrecht, Mark Bollinger, Sergio Morales, Mark Dell, Jim Gallagher, and Stephen Sue. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to lon.tv/support to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit lon.tv/s.